Australia was nearly 98% European ancestry within living memory. The best current estimates put us around 65% today and heading towards minority status this century. Over in Europe, Sweden is on track to become the first European country where non-Europeans will become the majority. Leo Pier has built a platform that lets ordinary people see and understand this trajectory over time. Today, we're going to walk through the data, the methodology, what's at stake, and what it would take to turn it around. Leo Pier is the creator of replacementclock.org, a demographic data platform tracking the European descended share of the population across 45 Western countries. Based in Montreal, he has a background in fine arts, philosophy, and media studies, with graduate research focused on political obscurantism in academia and the media. He's a member of the Nouvelle Alliance, the vanguard Québécois nationalist movement. Leo's project fills the gap that our Australian government, political parties, and statistical agencies have chosen not to show or project. Transparent tracking of the ancestral composition of the country. After all, demographics is destiny. Leo, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to talk.
Now, Leo, what made you decide to build this yourself after, I'm assuming, looking at all the different options that you had for trackers?
Well, first of all, I couldn't find a tool like that. I was very curious. You know, we keep hearing about the demographic changes, and I went looking for a tool that would give me the full picture of what was happening across the West, and couldn't find one. So I wanted to create a tool that tracks the magnitude of the demographic replacement across the West. And yeah, that's what I've been doing for the past 6 months now.
So I was extremely impressed with the website and the detail that was in it. Very slick. And I noticed in your definition, one of the key things was about European descended or European ancestry. And then you put a limit around the 75% threshold. Now, why would you use that standard instead of, I've heard people use previously the term white. I noticed there's a reason for that though.
Yes, exactly. Well, white is a very shifting category and definition. So not only does it change in terms of what people culturally mean by it, but also it's even in the censuses and the statistical offices, this word means different things. For example, in the United States, it includes, for a long time, it included both the Middle Eastern and the North African populations. So it's not a very good definition for what I was interested in tracking, which is really, I think, what I understand when I hear the word white, which is people of European ancestry.
I've heard it also can mess with crime statistics, for example, and they can be using this to basically hide and obfuscate the crime in cities by grouping particular ethnicities into that category and hiding the extent of the disparity between crime in different countries.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is not something that the site tracks at the moment, but unfortunately, yeah, there's a lot of games that are being played like that with categories when it comes to statistics, which make it difficult to get a clear picture.
If I was to put on my, the opposite hat, I suppose people would question, AI or any particular website could just make up anything they want to show. Do you have like an audit trail in place? Like how, in terms of your methodology, are you going to make it available for people to be able to really dive in and check your work effectively?
Yeah, I think it's very important that people are able to look at exactly how the numbers are constructed. So first of all, the site has a very detailed methodology page that I encourage anybody who's curious about the project to go and read. That explains really all the decisions that went into building the numbers. But then at the moment, the calculations are not yet public, but they will be very soon. There will be a way on the website to actually look in table forms at exactly what went into each calculation, all the adjustments that were done. Because I think, yes, of course, not only is it good, is it important in terms of the credibility of the site, but especially a project like this, it has to stand really on its own in terms of the quality of the numbers, because it's going to be attacked by people for political reasons. So the transparency is very key, I think, in this case.
And I suppose over the last 12 months, as I've been trying to understand what is going on in this space across Australia, and then I suppose across the rest of the world, I've been looking at ways to do this analysis myself, and even the analysis very basic compared to what you've done on a global scale. I was getting very similar numbers. Like by 2100, I was getting 20 to 30% of the population, but I'd tightened it up even a little bit more than yourself, where I was looking at heritage Australians, so people that had fourth generation links to the country as a minimum, because I can see that as a loyalty thing. So even though I think Europeans are great metric to have a look globally, it makes quite easy with like a 75% cutoff. Looking at that tries to ensure that if 40 million people from Germany turned up in Australia, all of a sudden the country wouldn't feel Australian anymore, even though they're both, you could argue, European. And so I could definitely say from my initial look at the Australian numbers, I think they're definitely reasonable. I'd be very curious to see what other people are saying for the other countries that people have done. Have you had any feedback from different people in different countries that have done their own analysis yet?
Yes, I've received a flood of emails. Often people are wondering why their their specific country isn't tracked yet. And again, in the methodology page, I explain why, for example, South Africa isn't tracked, or certain countries in South America. And other times people, I think, intuitively feel that the number might be wrong if they live in a city and they see that around them, Europeans are becoming a minority very, very quickly. I think they intuit a reality that is perhaps more pronounced than what national numbers might show. But what you're talking about with the national ethnicity, that's also been part of the feedback that I've gotten. People are very curious to know, well, that's all well and good, how many European, what is the share of European people in the country, but I want to know what is the share of ethnic French or ethnic English, and I think that's also a very legitimate desire. It also does speak to demographic replacement. So this is something that I think I will be adding to the site in the future, because I think it also speaks to people on a different emotional register.
Yeah, so I was having some of the big ones, I suppose. Globally, European descended share being at 30% in 1950, 12% today, projected to be 6% by 2100. That trajectory doesn't look great for the European people in the world. We are going to be a proper minority globally, and that trajectory. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm, concerned and dismayed. I think there's a lot of reasons why we see this declining share. I think this is something that we should start talking about more. I think it should become more central in public debate and policy debates, and we should perhaps be less reticent or yeah, to start talking about this declining share, because it's going to have impact. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, massive impacts, especially when you see how other countries treat minorities and other cultures treat minorities. In the Islamic countries, for example, how they would treat Christians when they're a minority. Then you'd also have in Hindu countries where how they treat their minorities. I just don't think people fully understand the majority of a country matters, especially in a democracy where the majority rules. So whoever's got the majority gets to determine what rules are in the country and how you treat everyone. So I just don't think people fully understand the long-term implications, and the fact that it's happening globally. There is no other European countries to escape to. This is happening across the board everywhere.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it reminds me, there's a famous, I think, passage in Michel Houellebecq. He has this novel called Submission about basically France becoming an Islamic republic, and there's this one sentence, I think, pronounced, uttered by a Jewish girl. Who talks to her French professor, and she says, "Well, there's no Israel for you." When friends become minority French, there's no place for you to go. And I think this is something we have to start thinking deeply about.
Yeah, it becomes a thing of survival, and I'd like to see the Australian people, I'd like to see all of the Anglosphere wake up to what is happening, and because it gets increasingly harder to turn it around the further these numbers go. I saw Sweden apparently is projected to be the first European country where we're going to end up with non-Europeans becoming the majority. What's the current European descended share, and at what point in the future do you think it's going to cross over?
So let's see, actually. Because I do not know the numbers for every country by heart, but you're right. That's Sweden is the very first European country. It's projected right now around 2019 to cross below the 50% threshold, and at the moment it's around 78.3% European descent.
Which is crazy to me, like to see a country like Sweden. Like, what will Sweden be like when the Swedes no longer have the majority in the country? Like, I don't understand why there has been this lack of concern about the demographic future for the Swedish people, the German people, the English people in all these countries, and why it is happening across the board.
Yeah, well, one thing that I want to highlight here is that the projections also at the moment they basically are extending current trends into the future. So it's not a premonition. It's not. I think the fate of Sweden isn't sealed. If it starts,
it could still be turned around if they, yeah.
Exactly. If Sweden starts looking at, for example, some of the policies that Denmark have implemented, and if the conversation start, changing to include solutions, for example, like remigration, European countries can avoid the prolongation of these trends. It's possible.
Yeah, and the countries at the top, it's not even the European ones that seem to be going first. Like I think it was the top one was Argentina, and then I think it went US, and then maybe Canada or Australia, and then Canada. Like we are the ones that are going to be getting hit first. I think Canada, I think it was around 62% or 60% in 2026, and then heading to 30. Around 40% or so in 2100. How do you think that's going to end up changing how it's like to live in Montreal or Quebec?
Oh well, Montreal has already changed. This is where I live personally, so I can attest to this. And actually, right now you can look at data for the greater area of cities for both the United States and Canada. I haven't yet added data, um, metropolitan data for other countries yet, but this is something that I will be doing in the future. So Montreal at the moment is around 73%, 74%. But if you look at Toronto, it's already down to 44% European. And you have cities like Brampton that is at 25%. Oh, sorry, this is not even 2026, my bad. Montreal is at
Have you seen
63%.
the cities themselves, like in terms of the leaders in the cities? Have they all started to change and reflect the demographics of the country, and they're no longer long-term people from Quebec or Montreal? Like, has that started to occur, like it's happening in England, for example?
Yeah, like England, also in the States. Um, well, Quebec is a bit different from the rest of Canada in that it has a very strong sense of identity. I think that has been shaped by um, the sense of being a minority in a broader Anglo country. So Quebec is resisting a little bit more, especially on I think in the cultural front. It's been adopting laws that are meant to protect the French language and to some extent the Québécois culture. So we haven't yet seen that as much as in the rest of Canada, but in the rest of Canada, definitely. Of course, if you have a large portion of the population that is, for example, Indian or Sikh, well, they will start voting for politicians that they think represent them and their interests and the interests of even sometimes their home country.
And those laws that you're talking about that protect the Quebec or the French Canadian heritage, they get determined by the majority. So as those numbers change, I can imagine that would change with it, and you could end up with other languages being written apart from French. Like, why would we treat French as being the language in Quebec when the majority of the people there are speaking Hindi, for example?
Yeah, exactly. When demographics change, then of course politicians start, seeking their votes and sometimes pandering to these communities. So it's just a natural process where the historical majority, when it loses political power, then its interest or recedes. Yeah.
Mm. One of the big things that I saw, there's two aspects to it. You've got fertility, the fertility rate or the fertility collapse across the West, and then the migration composition as like two things that are really driving this collapse quite quickly. So in Australia, for example, our fertility rate is quite low. It's sitting around 1.42, whereas 2.1 is what you'd be wanting to maintain the population. How have you incorporated those types of numbers in the calculations that you've done so far, and is there in terms of changing policies? Obviously, if we were able to put in place policies that encourage larger families, and make the family great again, for want of a better term, and to try and encourage the Australian people to build their own country, or the Canadian people to build their own country.
Yeah. Well, first of all, at the moment, the website doesn't yet track the differing fertility rates between groups, but it does take it into account when it comes to the projections. Yeah, this is included in the calculations that make up the future projections. When it comes to that, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But policy tend to be, at least in most Western countries, they tend to be ethnicity neutral. So that, for example, um, in Canada, when we put in place social measures that are meant to incentivize the population to have more children, um, well, if the populations that have the most children are, for example, are immigrant communities, then you're basically accelerating a process of replacement. So I think what's needed is cultural changes and cultural conversations, as well as policies that I think, for example, remigration would help in many ways people of European descent to have bigger families. It would lower the cost, for example, of housing. It would ensure better jobs for the native populations, which are all things that are obviously important for family formation.
Well, I suppose one of the big things in terms of those projections and the fertility rate and how you do those policies. So previously in Australia, they did this thing called the baby bonus, where it was just like a cash handout of like $5,000 per baby that you ended up having. That obviously doesn't necessarily incentivize people that are taxpayers. The ensuring that people are not taking advantage of the system and free money, I think, is an important thing. And one way I liked the idea that I think it's Hungary had is to basically just put in place tax incentives to encourage larger families. So you're not getting any benefit unless you actually are working. And as a single family, married family, so you're not incentivizing these games that are being played around 4 wives in 4 different places, all collecting welfare checks in certain countries. So I think what Restore is doing, trying to like knock out all of the welfare, people taking advantage of the welfare system, making it so that you know, you're encouraging people that are actually contributing is a great start. What have you seen in Canada, for example, for in those type of areas?
Well, in Canada, we do have a fairly generous social system. There's free childcare that is being implemented in Quebec. I think this is why I say I think there's a cultural dimension to this. European descended Canadians are choosing to have smaller families than other communities. And this is a conversation that, I mean, we're aware of this. It's even mentioned in the media, but there hasn't really been a conversation about why.
How do we reverse it?
Exactly. And
cost of housing is a massive one for us in Australia. I'm assuming it's very similar in Canada. It's just pushing people to have families later, and then they're struggling to have families because they're not as fertile as they were in their younger years. So I suppose we're doing it to ourselves to some extent.
Yes, and I definitely think that mass immigration is accentuating the problems. I think this would be one of actually the best pro-European natalist policy would be to really tackle the issue of immigration.
I suppose looking at the problem in the future, what do you think is going to happen culturally, politically, when the historic people of a particular nation, like I can think of Syria, for example, northern and southern Syria, when you ended up with another minority becoming a majority, and then you end up with a clash happening. What are your thoughts on these type of issues into the future for Canada, for the Anglosphere, for Europe more broadly?
Yeah, it's true. As we mentioned, let's say the settler nations like Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand are further along in terms of this great replacement process. And already in Canada, we really do see these kinds of ethnic tensions rising, and often you have very severe ethnic tensions between different immigrant communities. So um,
India and
there's
Sikhs, for example.
exactly, and honestly, it's kind of obscene, at least from in my opinion, to come to a new country and then start imposing these kinds of tensions on your host society. But as the majority basically recedes, as the historical majority recedes, and yeah, there's going to be a contest for power, definitely. And I think different groups are going to be advocating for their own ethnic interests
Nations. Mm.
and nations. This is also an issue in Canada where you have politicians who are um, basically advocating for policies that are useful for India, for China. Um, so yeah, no, I think it's it's going to become extremely tense. I think, and it's one of the I think that's one of the consequences of having a disappearing majority that in many ways could um, help
Stabilize.
stabilize and also provide the necessary social trust that societies need to function.
And then you have the governments that are like enforcing these, enforcing cohesion, enforcing social cohesion, and you can't do that. That's not a long-term strategy. Like it's crazy to me that this is where our governments are at. You know, hate speech laws, trying to like stop people from talking and discussing these issues that are going to have a long-term impact on not just themselves, on their children and their grandchildren, for their country within our children's lifetime. And it is horrifying to me that this is where our political class is at, just pushing for votes, not really thinking about the long-term impact of these decisions that are made.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's kind of, I suppose it kind of betrays the failure of multiculturalism, that you need increasingly authoritarian laws to maintain the illusion of unity. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just does not seem to be a long-term strategy for a country to succeed. Like one of the things I was looking at last night was after Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Americans ended up in concentration camps because there was a concern around loyalty to a country. I do not understand. So back then, I think it was in the order of about 120,000 Japanese Americans that they ended up basically, I think, stripping of their land and rights, and then putting them together and saying, you're just going to have to wait it out. We're not sure if you're going to be causing trouble in this war. Converting that to numbers for today, I think it comes to about 1 million, I think. And so for Australia, we have three main separate ethnic, cultural, civilizational powers that we have built up into quite large, demographics. We've got 1 million for Islam, 1 million for India / majority Hindu, and 1 million for Chinese Confucius-ish type thinking. If we had a West versus East war, like how on earth can you think that loyalties aren't going to come into play? And we're talking like 10 times the numbers of what what was occurring back then. So to me, it's like there's a massive loyalty issue, a massive sovereign risk associated with it. You are not going to be able to deal with that large a proportion of people that may be working against you in your own country.
And I think it's becoming even an explicit part of the foreign policy strategy for countries like India, for example. I think they understand very well that basically exporting part of their population provides this strategic advantage when it comes to putting pressure on countries like Canada.
So you did some work previously on political obscurantism, I think is the correct, forgive me
Yes.
for my English there. So
Yes.
the media and academia, as we were talking earlier, around about the Great Replacement being like a conspiracy theory, for example. Yet the numbers that you're showing, the numbers that many people that are doing these analyses are showing, is that it is occurring. Like it's not a conspiracy theory. You can see it with your own two eyes. What is this what led you to this kind of area? Like what was that graduate work about? You know, and is this the best example of it today?
Yes. Well, basically, I was studying. You might say wokeness before woke became a common word. I was looking at the manner in which universities and the media, but primarily universities, were basically abandoning their mission of teaching and constructing knowledge in favor of advancing political narratives. And I was myself, I was in a department that was extremely activist in its orientation. And so, and again, this was before, the craziness that we witnessed later on around 2020. But yeah, I think honestly, this is the maybe the primary problem that the West has to deal with is the manner in which most of its institutions, including the institutions whose mission is to gather knowledge and information, most of these institutions have exchanged their mission for something completely different. And it makes it extremely difficult to have honest conversations about the issues that we're facing, because there's really a censorship on almost any issue that deals with the consequences of this egalitarian ideology.
Yeah, like I suppose the consequences. Is there any particular, groups or things that are occurring that you could point to that go, hang on a sec, why are these people actually advocating for this, and why is it occurring across the entire Anglosphere and the West? And if you start pointing those types of things out, all of a sudden you can be censored, you can lose your accounts. I saw some young guys in I think it was in America. There was a young gentleman who recently pointed out that the Australian government, for example, is censoring people, is not allowing people to talk about this, and there's like this very strong regime that's occurring here. And within the next couple of weeks, a 300,000 follower account in Instagram just completely wiped. The overreach is just phenomenal, and it makes it very hard for people to be able to have these discussions without resorting to the next thing. If you don't allow people to speak, the only next stage is violence and stuff, and we didn't ever want to get to that point. So I don't see why people don't realize that allowing people to talk about these things is the best way to have the discussion, have the debate. Allow the people to talk, and then that is what will bring about unity, when people have a common, a common ability to be able to talk and challenge things in the political system.
The censorship really began when the people in power started sensing that they were in many ways losing control of the public,
of the narrative,
of the public. For example, you see there's a very interesting long form piece that came out recently called, I think, The Closing of the Internet, that I really encourage everybody to go read. And it chronicles the manner in which the internet was basically heavily censored. And you can trace a lot of it to Brexit and to the first election of Trump, where I think the people in power really sensed that all of a sudden they were losing grip on the narrative and on the public, and panicked, and then turned to censorship. So I think this is only going to get worse, in my opinion, as the dominant ideology continues to fall apart in contact with reality and with the events. I think the people in power will turn to censorship rather than basically start listening to people in the West, start listening to their population. I think, they will increasingly turn to authoritarian measures, unfortunately.
Mm. In Canada, so I lived in Roslyn for 4 years in British Columbia, and there was a small French-Canadian school there, and they were, I suppose, trying to maintain the French language. I think the kids all went to school, and ensuring that culture is maintained. My understanding is the French Canadians all, like, there's quite a strong lineage in the order of like 10,000 or so in the 17th, 18th century. And there was like a really high rate of shared ancestry from that core group. What's it going to mean for Quebec and that portion of the population as that ends up being continually diluted? And is there an awakening that's occurring amongst the Quebec people, the French Canadian people, that like they should really be speaking out about this, because the smaller populations, I think, would get hit first.
In Quebec, a lot of the political energy amongst people who care deeply about their identity has been directed towards the cause of separation and independence. And to a certain extent, this has
basically so they can have their own borders, so they can have their own borders and be able to control their own migration, I suppose, to some extent.
Yes, that's. I mean, that's not the original reasons, because this is a struggle that began way before the mass migration that we saw. But this is definitely one of the reasons why Quebec would want to become independent, is to basically take back control of its own border. But increasingly, what you do see is a clash between, let's say, left-wing separatists and right-wing separatists. And the right-wing separatists are basically nationalists in the sense that we understand, let's say, European nationalists. I mean, that they care about, let's say, an ethno-cultural identity. But increasingly, you have a powerful movement of left-wing separatists who think of separation almost as a way to create a more progressive state, a more inclusive, perhaps even a state with even more porous borders. So I think this is going to be like an interesting fight and struggle. So
it could go either way. It could go either way.
Yes, exactly. So it's a bit perhaps counterintuitive for some people to imagine a Quebec nationalism that would ironically harm the Québécois people, but it's possible that we're heading this way. In a similar way that for different reasons, but also when after Brexit, which was obviously motivated in large part by anti-immigration sentiment, immigration actually shot up after Brexit. So leaving
which is extremely counterintuitive.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of parallels between let's say, Brexit and the potential exit of Quebec. It could go either way.
Yeah, so I've seen in Canada, like there's a movement and a conference, I believe, coming up in the next week or two. I think is it the Dominion conference coming up, and I think you've got Martin Sellner potentially coming to Canada to talk about remigration and what's going on over in Europe, and I suppose to help awaken the Anglosphere. What's been occurring in that space?
Yeah, so the Dominion Society is a nationalist organization movement that's quite young. I think it's just 1 year old. And it's really focused on promoting, I think, the message of remigration. So what you might also call, let's say, demographic security for the founding stock of Canada, which include obviously the French Canadians, the English, the Scots, and the Irish. So it's become very popular in quite a short amount of time, and they're having their first conference just in a couple of weeks from now. And yes, they have international speaker. They've announced Martin Sellner, as well as Charlie Dowes, I think his name is, from Restore. He's one of the Restore Britain. Yes. So I will be going. I'll be attending the conference. I'm very curious to meet some of the more, let's say, Anglo nationalists, which I have less of a chance to interact with, because I'm myself part of a Québécois nationalist organization here in Quebec. But I think that we are probably going to have to work together in the future, and perhaps start putting some of the bad blood that the Québécois and the Anglo-Canadians have had in the past. If we want to protect everybody's security, demographic security.
Yeah, and I think the you can put the tensions aside. It's like the difference between Protestantism and Catholicism. If you lose the entire country, what is the point in having your little disagreements over the various differences there? You can do that later, but we're talking about survival at this point. The gentleman that you mentioned, Charlie, he's done an amazing job of keeping Restore on track. Like, I've seen some of his speeches as like a young leader in the UK. He's definitely a standout.
Yeah, I hope he'll be there in person. I'd be surprised if Canada wouldn't let him in, but you never know. So it should be interesting. And it's also important, I think, for these, because you have all these nationalist movements that are emerging across Europe and across the West, and it might seem at first counterintuitive for all these nationalists to start coming together across different nations. But I think cooperation is extremely important for the movement of remigration to start gathering steam. Nationalists basically of all different nations have to start working together.
Yeah, so for example, social media, with all the bans that are occurring, like there's America, and even a smaller group within America seems to control pretty much all of our social media platforms. So they're very quick on censoring, very quick on deleting accounts. Gab would be one of the only ones that I can think of that seems to have a very free stance on how they run their platform, but it's still a small thing. But in terms of working together across all the nationalists, like, I suppose we need to ensure that network is there offline, that's not just on social media, that those connections are made, that as a movement, as a people, as a European people, that we're actually working together to ensure that our country's survival and our people's survival into the future.
Yeah, no, exactly. And this is some of the work that Martin Sellner of the Institute for Remigration has been doing, really building a network of nationalists who are fighting for their countries, and giving them tools. Also, I think it's It's because we never know, as you say. Social media is very. These companies are changing their policies constantly, promising free speech and then not delivering. So we'll see. And yeah,
and very
we
hard to
might
push
also
back. Very hard to push back. Like if you get blocked, they'll just ice you. Like you just won't get. There'll be no discussion. Like I've had it happen to me for a number of weeks, and there was no discussion. There was
oh, really?
no. I didn't even know what tweet it was, and then just all of a sudden, that after they said multiple times it will not be. Reactivated. It just all of a sudden reactivated. But there was no.
Really?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's ridiculous, and that was X. But I'm sure it will happen across everything. You say the wrong thing once, they'll ice your whole account and all the the goodwill and those connections that you built up over long periods of time. It's in my opinion, like we've got this thing called the E-Safety Commissioner that basically goes around censoring Australians or Canadians. Even like Billboard Chris got hammered by our e-censor and had to come to Australia to try and fight it. He ended up winning. Multiple people have actually won against our government in these cases. But the way that the overreach that they do to the Australian population is ridiculous. And if anything, our government should be standing up for the rights and the free speech of its citizens and be advocating on behalf of our rights to these foreign corporations to say, no, you're not censoring our people. Like we expect this, and if you're not, you're going to be losing access to our country or something along those lines. There needs to be, in my opinion, a stronger push to ensure the free speech of your citizens, not the other way around.
Yes, absolutely agree. I mean, I think at the moment the only country that is pushing back on this is the United States, the current administration, which of course, if the Democrats
in certain ways,
yeah, yes, it would be the opposite. But yes, which is also why I think building institutional power is extremely important. You need to have networks, you need to have lawyers, policy experts, people who are able to effect real change, not just social media influencers. And we need to build institutions because that's how real power is exercised. And,
outside of the system, and be able to apply leverage to the system from the outside to some extent,
and also from the inside when it's possible. It's often very difficult to do, but it's not impossible.
So you've seen one of the things I suppose that made me reach out to you is I saw some of the tweets get retweeted. You had Elon Musk get on board and give your site a bit of a boost. And then I believe, did you have like a DDoS attack on the actual website? They tried to like ice it on you. How did you go with that?
Yes, well, yeah, that was funny. Within the very first hours of me announcing the site, it suffered a DDoS attack. I'm using Cloudflare, which have pretty robust defenses, so I was able to mitigate that for the time being. I don't think the site has been offline. And yes, I mean, I'm a small account on, especially I was before launching the website, a very small account on X. Basically, I had some larger nationalist, Canadian nationalist accounts that retweeted the project, and somehow it made its way to Elon's eyeballs. So very thankful for this.
Yeah.
But from now on, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. Obviously want people to take notice of the site, to know it exists as a resource so they can share it. And when they're having conversations about the demographic changes in their country, that they can reach to the site, and basically put numbers on the conversations that they're having.
Well, one of the things I suppose, following on from that, is how do you show people what future would look like based on what political party and what particular specific policies would do? So I would love to see a bit more a look at that. So, for example, in Australia, you'll have the Labor Party, which is pretty much as many people as they can get in, and then the Liberal Party will be just slightly less than that. But when you look at, and then the One Nation Party will be a little bit less than that again. But even if you look at the numbers, if you're not under 80,000 in Australia, you are replacing the native population in the country. And so I'd love to see projections and being able to show the people. Based on these policies, if you have these parties in place and these particular policies, this is what the future would look like. So currently you're basing your projections based on the baseline of where it's at now and what it's looking like. But I think people need to understand, like if you vote restore or if you vote reform, what the future for your country would look like if their goals of their policies actually came to pass.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. Something I should be looking into. It's sometimes difficult to evaluate the political consequences of these parties, and very often they do disappoint. But you're right that it does matter, of course. I think the same could also be the same idea could be applied to actual policies. Different policies, and then this could also encourage political parties to adopt these policies. So if you were if you were able to, for example, see different projections and different models, basically different projections according to whether, for example, such and such policy or perhaps remigration is implemented, then you can also vote accordingly, right? Vote for parties that favor these policies. So maybe that would be a way to implement a perhaps more like rich version of the projections on the site.
Correct. To be able to show like the span of options, like of future options based on parties and an ideal number that you would propose to either maintain or get it back on track towards solidifying the identity of our various nations. One of, I suppose, the big things that are attacking us is the university system, the education system, and what our children are being exposed to through these systems, and how it's really pushing them towards these, Marxist, communist ideals that they've got no patriotism for their country, and really nearly it's like a suicidal empathy type worldview. What do you see in Canada and Europe more broadly on how are we going to turn around that that area that's really poisoning the minds of the young people across the West?
Yeah, well, I often say that everything bad the West is experiencing right now is downstream of the universities, because all of our institutions are staffed by people who have gone through this system, and it's a system that basically creates a culture, right? It's an ideology, it's a culture, and people emerge from universities and go, fill all these positions in the media and in education, of course. So I'm not sure exactly what to do about the universities, to be honest. It's something that I think about a lot. I think, again, that's why institutional power is going to be very important. And if we start winning elections, well, we've seen a little bit of that with the Trump administration, but I think it should have gone much further, to be honest.
It's been a disappointment, I think, to a lot of the American people. Like, it hasn't lived up to the hype, would be my guess.
No, and in most Western countries, especially, definitely in Canada, the universities are heavily, almost entirely subsidized or paid by taxpayer funds, right? And same for a lot of the media. In Canada, most mainstream media is heavily subsidized. We have state media, the CBC, that is almost just a tool of progressive propaganda in Canada. So it would be completely legitimate for a government who has been elected and has a mandate to really, if not reform, then completely remake these institutions, because it's the taxpayer who are paying for it. These are not quite private institutions. It's different if you're a private media corporation, or if you're an entirely private university. But when you're talking about what's being done with taxpayer money, I think it's completely legitimate for the state to start having a say in that.
In Australia, for example, it's gotten so bad that even our government is funding the private media. There's large amounts of funds that are going. So you can definitely see how the influence of government would start to overrun the people learning the truth when everyone's being funded by the machine, and potentially undermining the people of Australia by these various organisations.
Yes, so it's complicated because, of course, I wouldn't say that the Canadian government is responsible for the rot in our universities. It's more the opposite, and from where I'm standing, it's the universities have created the ideologies and the kind of the ideological matrix through which then the people staffing government and other institutions see the world. So in a way, and indeed, really, I don't think the universities will reform themselves. So I understand that. I think a lot of people are, if they have more of a libertarian mindset, or they're reticent to using state power. But I think, if nationalists starts winning election, I don't think they should be shy of using state power to basically reform these institutions, because they will not reform themselves. And everything I know about the universities tell me that this culture will not change of its own.
Yeah, I've seen a number of university lecturers end up getting censored or hauled over the coals, basically cancelled to some extent if you speak out and don't follow the main, like what's the accepted norm. You'll be challenged and you'll be destroyed, and that should not be how our system operates. It should be through open debate. And contest of ideas is what's supposedly built our great country, and they don't want to be challenged. They're not appreciating that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we should start, putting laws into place that ensure that ideological diversity is protected on university campuses, for example. That would be a way to really apply pressure on these institutions. That would be a start, because you're right. It's almost impossible for, both for professors, but even for invited guests who disagree with the dominant ideology. It's almost impossible now to speak on campus.
Look, Leo, really appreciate your time. Is there any final words, any thoughts for Australia, the Australian audience on anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap things up?
I would just say that we're all in this together. This is something that is happening across historically European countries, including Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So I think we have to look at solutions together, and I hope that the website can help at least give a tool for people. So I would really encourage people to go and have a look. And if you have any questions, please, people can reach out to me if they have estimates that differ. I'm very, please do flag it. I'm very open to feedback. This is a new project, and there's still a lot of work to do. So, and share it if you can.
Yeah, so the website is replacementclock.org, and our Western civilization, the people need to understand where we're at and where the future's headed, so you can make the right decisions now and turn things around.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Leo. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the conference, the upcoming conference, and I hope you get to meet the other gentlemen and nationalists around the world, and hopefully we can turn things around.